So what did your colleagues, is it Ottawa that asked you, or?
I'm wondering,
I'm
and I mean, we all have this question. So does Trudeau have the full support of his cabinet to stay on as Prime Minister?
Yes.
Simple yes?
Yeah.
Okay. And as a follow-up, would you like the opportunity in the future to lead this country if you were given the chance?
So full points for trying with that question. If the Prime Minister has the full support of his cabinet, then why would we contemplate what happens after he decides to leave?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, good morning. I have a similar question. Liberal backbenchers here in your home province want or have called for Prime Minister Trudeau to step down. What are your thoughts on that?
So I've answered that question in other fora as well. I respect the views of my colleagues. The New Brunswick MPs who've shared that view are friends of mine. They're people I respect. Some of them have been friends of mine for a couple of decades. If you think of a guy like Serge Cormier or René Arsenault that I've known for a long time, I recruited Jenica Atwin to the Liberal caucus. I'm very proud of that. She's a terrific MP for Fredericton. That's a view they're expressing. The Prime Minister listened carefully when that view was expressed to him. Colleagues did what is the appropriate thing. They, in a caucus meeting, expressed those views directly to the Prime Minister himself. He listened. He, in some cases, responded to specific things that were raised. And he said he would reflect carefully on what he's heard. That's how the process works. That's the way these things are decided. And I'm confident that the government will remain focused on the work that Canadians want us to focus on. If we're potentially 5 weeks away from 25% tariffs applied across the board to Canadian exports to the United States, Canadians would understandably, I think, be impatient with a government that looks at itself all the time. We shouldn't be looking inward. We shouldn't be worrying about ourselves. The government got the confidence of the House of Commons 10 times last week. So the opposition parties that are all outraged, they need an election right away, they voted confidence in the government 10 times last week. So Parliament comes back on the 27th of January. Mr. Trump is inaugurated on January 20th. The work that the Prime Minister asked me to do as the Finance Minister with issues around border security is to work with the incoming administration, and I'll have meetings over the Christmas holidays with some key players in the incoming Trump administration. So that's the work that I'm focused on doing, and I think Canadians would be impatient if we spent an inordinate amount of time focusing on ourselves.
That was my follow-up, too, about President-elect Trump. What do you make of his comments on social media about Canada being the 51st state and Governor Trudeau? Does that irk you, and how are relations with the U.S. right now?
I was at the dinner at Mar-a-Lago 3 weeks ago. The president made those comments joking. And there was a cheerful banter. It was a private dinner. There was a cheerful banter between the Prime Minister. I even chirped in with something. This was a joke. He's gone on to say some of this stuff in social media. Again, our government's job is not to respond to everything that President Trump's going to post. He's quite active on social media. We again, would be spending a lot of time focusing on his social media comments. What we're doing is focusing with him, but more importantly with people like Howard Lutnick, who will become the incoming Commerce Secretary responsible for the U.S. Trade Representative function. I had a call this week with a very positive preliminary call with Tom Homan, who President Trump has tapped to be the border czar, who's from upstate New York. He knows the northern border very well. We agreed to meet in the coming days after Christmas to talk about the package I announced, $1.3 billion on Tuesday around enhanced border security posture, the fight against fentanyl. So that's the work we're focused on. And your second, the last part of your question, I'm confident that we have a cordial, collaborative discussion with President Trump's incoming administration, but we have a lot of work to do. I don't underestimate for a minute the threat that those tariffs would mean to Canadian workers, to the Canadian economy. I also think, and we said this to Mr. Trump at Mar-a-Lago, it would also be negative for American consumers. If he won an election largely on the cost of living in the United States, this may not be the best way
For
to
those of our
answer
viewers
that
in
concern,
Atlantic Canada, you can
in
continue
the United
watching
States as well.
the
But that's
Minister
the
of
work we need to
Finance,
continue to do.
LeBlanc,
So far,
talking
I'm
in New
encouraged. We have an
Brunswick, talking about the
attentive
full
ear.
support of
We have
Cabinet
a
for the Prime
cordial,
Minister.
Series of counterparts that want to work with us, but the work isn't finished, and we've got to work right up until January 20th, and then after he's inaugurated and he takes office with his incoming administration, we got to continue doing that work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bonjour, Monsieur le Ministre. Moi, j'aimerais revenir un instant sur le Centre d'excellence
I'd like to
en
come back to
santé.
the Center of
Je m'entretenais
Excellence
ce
for
matin
Health.
avec un ex-directeur général.
I discussed with the former Director General this morning that one of the problems in its current form is that some offenders that have committed serious crimes are experiencing health issues, but there are others who have committed more minor crimes. So are we going to be separating those two groups in the new center? That's a great question. I'm not an expert in the correctional service security categories given to offenders.
La seule chose, je ne veux pas être en désaccord avec votre
The
question, mais
only
de dire
thing,
que
and
c'est
I'm
des
not
crimes
disagreeing with your
mineurs.
questions, is talking
Normalement,
about
quand on finit dans
minor
une
crimes.
institution
Normally,
carcérale
when you end up
fédérale,
in a federal
c'est
incarceration
rarement
institute,
des crimes mineurs.
this is
Mais
rarely
vous avez
for minor
totalement
crimes.
raison. La
But you
population
are
est
correct.
variée. Il y a des
There's
personnes
a
qui vont
variety of
recevoir des
people
soins ici qui ont
among the
commis des actes
population,
très
and there are
violents.
people here
Et il y a
who will be
d'autres
receiving care who
qui
have
ont peut-être
committed
pas
very
été dans ce
violent
genre de
crimes,
crime-là. Alors, je
and
minimise
others
pas du
who
tout
did not commit that type of
la
crime. So I'm not
différence
all
entre
minimizing
certains
the
patients,
difference
certains
between
détenus.
certain patients or
Moi, j'ai
inmates.
pleine confiance dans le service
But I
correctionnel,
have full
dans
confidence
les
in the correctional
professionnels de soins de
service
santé qui
and
travaillent
healthcare
ici,
professionals
qui sont
working
ici,
here.
dans le processus d'évaluation d'un
They
délinquant.
are involved
Quand
in the process of
quelqu'un, disons, dans
evaluating
notre région,
offenders.
quand quelqu'un reçoit
For example,
une
when
peine
somebody in our
fédérale,
region
la personne
is sentenced
s'en va,
to a federal
dans notre cas, c'est à
sentence,
Spring Hill.
sometimes that
Ça
person
s'appelle une
goes to
centre de
Spring Hill,
réception.
which is a
It's like
reception
the
center.
check-in quand vous recevez une peine fédérale. Et
So
là,
when
il y a
you
des
get a federal
professionnels
sentence,
qui
people
font un
pass
plan
through there.
correctionnel
And there are
basé sur
professionals
des
there
avis
who
de
create a
psychologues,
correctional
des
plan
travailleurs
based
sociaux,
on the
il y a
advice of
l'évaluation
psychologists,
médicale, c'est
social
sûr.
workers,
Alors,
and a
moi,
medical
j'ai pleine
assessment.
confiance que, on pourra
So
bien
I have
gérer
full confidence
cette
that we will
population-là.
be able
Mais là,
to
vous
properly
avez
manage
souligné
that
exactement
population.
le défi.
But
Regardez
you did
autour de nous.
highlight the challenge.
Si vous avez quelqu'un qui a commis un crime de meurtre,
If someone has
extrêmement
committed
violent,
murder,
il y en a
for
pas loin
example,
d'où
and
on
it was
est tout de suite.
extremely violent,
ces gens-là reçoivent peut-être des traitements, comme vous dites,
that person
dans un contexte
will
qu'on
receive
voit tout de
care,
suite aujourd'hui.
as you noted, in a context
le
as we
nouveau
noted today.
centre, avec 155
And at the
lits,
new center with
purpose
150
designed,
purpose-designed beds
planifié pour
that have been fully
prévenir,
planned out in order to
prévaloir exactement
And
And good to have
ce
you with
genre
us
de
here
défi.
on CTV News Channel on this Thursday. I'm
Exactly
Todd
this type
Vanderheiden.
of
We are
challenge.
following ongoing coverage here of Dominic LeBlanc. He's the newly minted Minister of Finance in the Trudeau government, longtime ally, of course, of the Prime Minister. He is at a live event in Dorchester, New Brunswick, of course, his home province. A lot of questions for the Finance Minister, given all the turmoil we've seen this week in the Trudeau government, the departure on Monday of Chrystia Freeland, and what it's going to mean. We're also hearing there is going to be a big shuffle tomorrow. A number of portfolios in the Trudeau government that are empty need to be filled, and we're hearing tomorrow Justin Trudeau will shuffle the cabinet and choose some new lieutenants for his team. Let's continue to listen in to the Finance Minister.
Précisément pour bien gérer les
This is
différentes
precisely in order to
populations.
properly manage the different populations.
Je vous remercie d'être patient.
Non, c'est
Thank you for your patience.
the good thing about being in a prison is you can't decide when you leave.
C'est ça.
If the questions get nasty, you'll spend the weekend here.
Fait que dans un tout autre ordre d'idée, je me demandais ce que vous
On
pouviez nous
another
dire
idea,
concernant votre
what can
avenir
you tell us
politique
about
et
your
celui du
political
Premier ministre.
future and that of the Prime
Alors, c'est un
Minister?
peu la question de votre collègue en anglais.
So that was kind of